In partnership with the Illinois Community College Student Activities Association, this webinar features a discussion with Dr. Amy Kuspa Sims and Alex Berry, both of whom will talk about the challenges and best practices related to completing the state's program review process. Sims is the manager of Student Activities and Wellness at Joliet Junior College, and Berry is the Director of Student Development and the Title IX Coordinator at Richland Community College.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today here at the Office of Community College Research and Leadership. Today's webinar is part of Program Review Illinois, and it is titled Conversations with Practitioners, the Importance of Quality Program Review to Advance Community College Student Support Services. In partnership with the Illinois Community College Student Activities Association, also known as ICSA, today's webinar will feature two community college practitioners currently engaged in program review. They will discuss challenges and best practices when completing the state's program review process for student support services. They will also identify tools to help other community college practitioners utilizing student and academic support services template complete a quality program review that advances equitable student outcomes. The format of today's webinar will include the panelists being asked a series of questions followed by a moderated Q&A portion at the end. So audience members, please feel free to submit questions using the chat feature. And to introduce ourselves, my name is Colvin Georges Jr., and I'm a research assistant in the Office of Community College Research and Leadership, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jewel.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Jewel Bourne. I'm also a research assistant at OCCRL. Nice to be with you. And so just to give you all a little bit of background on OCCRL, the Office of Community College Research and Leadership, OCCRL at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, engages and partners with students, administrators, and faculty to discuss, address, and strengthen pathways for all students with education, equity, justice, and excellence at the center of our work. And we encourage you to learn more about our work and our center at occrl.illinois.edu. And so today our conversation really centers around discussing best practices, challenges related to completing the state program review process, program review process, which seeks to support campuses in their strategic institutional programming and academic support services, program improvement, and support the continuation of locally relevant, accessible, and gainful programs and services for students across Illinois.
As previously mentioned, this webinar is in partnership with the Illinois Community College Student Activities Association. ICSA is a commission of the Illinois Council of Community College Administrators. This organization fosters relationships and ongoing support to student activities practitioners with a particular focus on student development and enhancement of student activities programs and/or services in Illinois community colleges. And now I will have each of our panelists to introduce themselves by stating their name, institutional affiliation, current professional role, and years of experience working on program review. We will begin with Dr. Kuspa Sims.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amy Kuspa Sims, and currently, most recently, I am serving now as it's official, the manager of student activities at Joliet Junior College. So that was just a recent change. But I would like to give a shout out to all my friends from ICSA. What a wonderful group. And if you are involved in engagement in any way, I would highly recommend that you look into ICSA. So that's my little commercial. Regarding program review, been a part of program review since my time here at Joliet Junior College, on and off, but more recently, probably in the last 5 years, as the process has really developed here on our campus. And the college is working to align our program review and our annual reports a little bit better. So it really helps enhance how we're able to approach our program review here on campus.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Alex Berry, and I am the Director of Student Development and Title IX Coordinator at Richland Community College in Decatur. Dr. Kuspa Sims, congratulations on the official position. That's very exciting. In my role at Richland, I really kind of help oversee the work of three areas. Student engagement, student activities being one of those, our success coaching, which is our academic advising, and our career and completion center, which is our career services. So recently, I've had the chance to be able to be involved in a couple of different program reviews, kind of starting back in 2016 when the student activities program review was done, and I was solely in the office of student engagement. And then just this past year, completing the program review for the advising and counseling piece, and then helping gear up for the student activities piece again this year. And also special shout out to ICSA folks, and thank you to OCCRL and the staff for putting this on. Looking forward to it.
And now to begin with our first question. What are the specific responsibilities that fall under your purview within your institutional context? And we'll begin with Dr. Kuspa Sims.
All right, but next time we're gonna have to have Alex go first, okay? All right, so I actually work in the Office of Student Activities and Wellness. So I've been involved in wellness conversations probably for the last 15 years here on campus, as well as campus involvement and engagement. And so currently our job is to help create a community on campus and making sure that our students have a meaningful campus life experience. And we also look at the holistic approach to being a human being and a college student, and we look at wellness programming. And so luckily our campus has also had a little shift in providing some new personal counseling opportunities for students as well, and been a part of those conversations. So very pleased with the efforts we're making around mental health, but specifically under our area, we are looking at overseeing our student clubs on campus, our collegiate club council, which are our governing body for all of our clubs on campus, and the financial support we provide our clubs. We have student government and a lot of leadership development programming. So we got leadership, wellness, diversity programming as well. And then pretty much anything else that comes under the idea of managing an office on a college campus. So other duties is assigned.
Can't forget that last bullet. Right?
I know, right?
So yeah, as I mentioned a bit earlier, so in kind of my specific purview, it's those three kind of distinctive areas, including the Title IX piece. At Richland, we've had some restructuring over the past several years. About 3 years ago was when we really kind of redeveloped some of the specific areas within our student success division. So kind of that newly created student development area, pulling those three pieces together, because when we think about kind of that life cycle and involvement and engagement of a student, a lot of times it's those three prongs. It's the student activities piece, the career services piece, and then that success coaching, academic advising piece. So really kind of taking that broader view and understanding how all of those connections can be made. So kind of, I always say at the institution that, the work that we do is all of the good stuff in the middle. We have our enrollment management colleagues that get students in the door, get them started with processes. They're handed off to their success coach. Student engagement, they're with them all throughout the way with new student orientation and programming and student clubs and organizations. sprinkling in career services all throughout. And then again, the enrollment management folks, the registrar is on that side and stamps their transcript at the end. So we really touch all students at the institution in the work that we do. And again, that's given me the opportunity, specifically with program review, to kind of look at that from different angles in those three specific areas.
Great, thank you. And so Alex, we'll just continue with our next question. If you can elaborate for us on how program review informs your own practice?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jewel. And I was at this point once, I'll be perfectly honest. I think when some folks approach program review, it's that, let's just check the box, get it done, and then it sits up on a shelf and is never looked at ever again, right? Until you're scrambling at the last minute, at that 5-year mark. But really what program review does and gives me the opportunity to do is look at that 30,000 foot 5-year snapshot, which is really important, because as we all know, it is really easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, even the semester to semester, year to year. So with program review, again, it's that snapshot in time. Here's what we said in the past. Here's what's working. Here's what's not working. Here's how we're looking in the future. Another way that I really kind of approach program review is, kind of operating under the auspice of, if I am no longer here, let's say staff turnaround is completely different, folks should be able to pick that up and say, this kind of makes sense. I get the sense of direction that this particular area was moving. So again, it's good for the folks here, because again, it provides that snapshot. But then moving forward, and something that I'll often tell our clubs and organizations as far as transitioning goes, you need to plan for when you're not here, right? So how do you set up an organization for when you graduate and move on to make that a good experience for those that come behind you? So that's really how I kind of approach it, and have tried really hard to approach it, and not just look at it as that singular checkbox, got it done, now I'm moving on with my life.
And I'll jump in there after Alex. I know for me, it really is looking at the strategic goals of the institution and making sure that our efforts align with those goals, both for academic success, but also for long-term employability of students. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later with some of the other questions, but really finding those spaces where engagement can support academic success and employability, and looking at it in a different way. Because oftentimes student activities is looked to for those fun people, but we know if you're involved, you're going to gain these skills. But now we got to put the terms around it and better align it with the academic side of the house. I think there's so much value there that we can really look at in making sure that we are clear in telling our story on our college campuses, in referring that back to the strategic goals of the institution.
Thank you. Can you describe your process for completing program review, including any support provided from your institution and the level of student engagement in the process?
Yeah, I'd be happy to start here if that's okay with you, Alex. I think there's two key things that I think about is data collection and how we collect data. And oftentimes in being in areas of engagement, We usually don't have programs or systems that are developed for our type of work, and oftentimes are asked to use systems that the college already has and make it work for us. So taking the time to really understand how you are going to collect data and what you're going to use it for. So kind of looking ahead, how are you going to analyze it? What are you looking for? And oftentimes being able to break down those numbers and maybe look at long-term, some long-term things, or looking back, graduation rates of involvement. It's very difficult for me to find that data on campus because I'm working in so many systems, just trying to find the data to add to the reports. And so being consistent with your data collection is really important. I know that's important for me. Also, the second thing I want to add is, you said students in the process. Be consistent from year to year in how you collect feedback from your students. So on our campus, we do a couple of things. We have a very simple survey for our programming. We have a couple scholarship opportunities. I actually look for that, for data, for some key, I look for some common coding as to what students are developing or expressing through their experiences and what they're learning, kind of going back to those learning outcomes and what they're achieving. And also we also do focus groups pretty much every other year, but also really listening to students' need as well. So, but you have to be consistent in that data so that data starts to match up from year to year and you're able to express it in a more holistic point of view.
Yeah, and I would certainly agree with Amy. When you think about student engagement, student activities specifically, it can be and is a nebulous thing, right? So it's thinking of ways to track data as best we can. And, I often rely a lot on our folks that do that at the college, and even kind of thinking through, Amy, your point about being consistent is spot on. And again, I think gets to that overarching goal of program review, right? It's great if we do all of these surveys, but if we can't measure it based on, a prior year or prior semester, it's nice, but let's look at that longevity. So something specifically that we've done, and I'll kind of harken back to the program review that was just submitted for advising and counseling, is looking at the Ruffalo Knoll Levitts. So we do the student satisfaction inventory every 2 years. And so that, is really one of the broader data sets that the institution has. So I know, and even in student activities, completing that plays a really important goal. And interestingly, we've got kind of lapsed on doing that for a couple of reasons. So we're doing that this semester, but specifically we had an honors statistics course that needed a project, and they kind of had various consultants or people whom they consulted on campus, and I was one of those people, and I was gearing up to work on program review. So that group, although it was not the same because the SSI is the SSI, but tried to get to the spirit of that. And that was their project in their honors statistics course, to try to get that sense of student satisfaction. So kind of played a couple of different roles in that, right? So it gave us data that we could say, hey, we can somewhat compare apples to apples here. But then again, it also gave the students that experience to be consultants to somebody and to actually see the fruits of their labor and how it can be used on campus. And another thing that, I hadn't really thought of until preparing for this is, even in that program review process, not just looking at those data pieces, those surveys that we do consistently, But now, it kind of got my wheels spinning. How can we actually include students in that process? So I was even thinking, do we bring a group of students together and say, hey, look at a draft of this, let's do a focus group, let's talk about this. That was kind of an aha moment for me, even preparing for this, is actually involving students in that process, and not just kind of by that default, we're including your voice and your data that you've provided, over the past several years. So yeah, I think I hit stuff there.
Yeah, thank you. And I think both of you have done this to some respect, but if you all would like to just share with us about when thinking about best practices and considering student demographics, if you can describe how conducting the program review process has informed initiatives relevant to advancing equitable participation in campus activities.
Yeah, so
either of you.
Yep. So this is certainly an area I think we need to be more explicit in. And sometimes you have to do that on paper, right? Because we'll often know of gaps that might exist. We know, hey, we need to take a look at this, that our campus might not be equitable in these certain areas. It's one of those, we know it, and I think especially with something like student activities, it gives us the opportunity to be very strategic when we think about programmatic efforts. At Richland anyway, we are the ones that kind of provide that campus-wide programming, and often in consultation with other areas of the college. But we're the ones that can have an impact on that, right? Because we have those funds, through student activity fees to be able to do that for the students, right? So as to where, an academic area might not have the luxury just to be able to, yes, let's plan a series of programs. We do have the luxury to do that. So I think that that's something that we can definitely be stronger in and be more explicit about in the program review process, and not just hint around things like I think sometimes we're good at doing in higher education, but to say, here's what we know, here are gaps that it is the institution's responsibility to address. Now, how can we do that? And I really think the program review process, and specifically student activities, is in a really good position to be able to do that.
Yeah, Alex, I think you really kind of started off that conversation. I just want to add to it a little bit. I think in that point, you also need to reach out to your counterparts across campus. In that, what I have found that oftentimes within a few years, sometimes department responsibilities change or shift. And maybe a department was offering, like one of our proud partners on our campus is Multicultural Student Affairs. I can't say enough about their work, but some of their responsibilities have shifted during these past several years. And, the pendulum also swings back. So that means some of those more diverse or cross-cultural programming have kind of come back to student activities a little bit. And I want to embrace that for our campus community. So that's important to recognize that those shifts could change. And this is a great time to review how you are working with your counterparts on campus, because we want to stay out of those silos and making sure that we are addressing the students' needs as a whole. Also, definitely, I know I'm an involvement person, so it really comes back to where are the students showing up, all right? I have found, especially in this past year, that involvement, entertainment is not what students are interested in right now. They are showing up in spaces where they can talk about issues that are important to them. And through those conversations, I've learned so much from them, but it's also heightened my awareness as to what kind of spaces we need to provide for our students. So we have amazing students on campus that have been very involved during these COVID times and this time of social unrest. And I can't say enough about how much I've learned from them and opening up those conversations. So definitely pay attention to their needs, because that has really shifted how we're approaching moving forward.
Thank you. What additional tools have you used outside of ICCB's program review template to inform continuous improvement efforts in your departments? For example, CAS standards, also known as the Council for the Advancement of Standards in Higher Education.
Well, I have to admit, I think like every time you do, it's kind of like a research project. I'm pulling up all kinds of stuff. I can't say that there's one particular area that I'm looking at. Of course, the CAS standards, but I'm definitely looking at other colleagues. I'm looking at other institutions. So I feel like I'm just kind of pulling and looking for the information that I need to help develop my story. So I apologize. I don't have a good answer for that one.
And, you know, I mentioned a specific piece, you know, looking at that, the Reflow-NOLA, that's SSI information, you know, has been important for us in multiple areas, you know, in student activities, advising and counseling, career services, because those are all addressed there. And again, it gives us kind of that longitudinal data piece. You know, something else that kind of struck me when I was thinking about this question is really looking at those assessment tools that you use on campus, right? And Amy kind of alluded to it a bit earlier. It's those learning outcomes that we have to document, and we do, and I'll say we have to be better about doing that on the co-curricular side anyway. But again, it's that place to put down on paper, here's what we want students to get out of the process, here's what we expect them to learn, here is how we have or have not done that. Or, you know, I know in our case, it's often that's a weakness that is described. We have got to do better with the assessment piece, and really kind of getting back to those co-curricular learning outcomes, tying those to the strategic plan, like Amy mentioned earlier. So it's, for me, it's kind of those internal, external tools that we use at the institution already, and tying all of that together. And frankly, for us anyway, program review is the time to do that, because we haven't, from my own experience, there hasn't been the opportunity to kind of lay it all out in one place besides program review.
Thank you both for your honesty in that. Our next question is, if you all can provide examples of how you support the needs of student groups that are involved with CTE programs, for example, the nursing clubs or the agriculture clubs, robotics clubs of those nature, and the impact of this support on advancing equitable outcomes for students?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the best things that I have been able to do in the past several years, and I like to say this in a fun way, I started sneaking into faculty meetings. I wasn't invited, I just kind of snuck in. And it really was at a point where they were talking about the academic outcomes for the institution. And when I started showing up, and I was embraced with open arms, we had a ton of wonderful conversation and received so much support from my faculty friends. So I definitely want to recommend building those partnerships. But one of the things that really came out and I discovered is that a lot of those learning outcomes that the faculty side of the house or the academic side of the house is looking at, is those outcomes are already happening in the spaces of engagement, right? It's a very natural space. So you get to learn those concepts, you get to learn the theories, you get to practice in your classes, but then you get to come out and really practice in those engagement spaces. And those learning outcomes have been a fantastic thing for me. We had adjusted them just a little bit. So now I actually get to go back and I could look at the learning outcomes for the academic side and say, student activities is supporting the academic learning outcomes of our institution. And this is how, and this is where, and this is how the data supports that. So for our more specific clubs or organizations or programs such as nursing or agriculture, I highly recommend making sure that if you have clubs, but you also have those faculty members involved in developing those outcomes for involvement, because you'll be able to provide that support. And oftentimes they have reporting needs as well regarding engagement pieces to their programs. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So I definitely want to support the idea of building those relationships with those who are building academic outcomes in their programs, because you will find a lot of collaboration and a lot of similarities in your efforts.
When I was, kind of thinking about this question, the first thing that popped in my mind is collaboration with whomever does Perkins on campus. We were fortunate, for a period of time, the Perkins grant coordinator lived within our division. And as I was talking to her and some of the data she was collecting and some of the goals that were a part of her quarterly reports and yearly submissions, I'm like, oh, you're already doing a lot of this work, and kind of the same stuff we're wanting to do as well, especially within the CTE world. And she had already kind of had that more, I would say, academic connection to the programs of, going to advisory committee meetings, being connected to WIOA, so really kind of thinking through all of that. And part of the new Perkins plan is those equitable outcomes and that major focus on that. So really kind of partnering and making sure that you're working together and not concurrently and not even realizing it, if that makes any sort of sense. And something that, and we were gearing to do this, as soon as COVID hit, are thinking of more of those CTE based student groups. So she was, in consultation with the student engagement office and really kind of thinking through, and of course, bringing the faculty members in to think through how can we make this work, right? And how can we make it equitable? So even when we think about programming, and this has always been like the question of when one does programming, right? So it's easy to kind of sit back and say, well, we have the bulk of students on campus from 10 to noon, right? That's when the halls are really a-going. But then thinking through specifically in those CTE programs, those evening welding courses, those evening HVAC courses, heck, the health profession students that are barely on campus even. So really kind of thinking about what can be done to have those students feel a part of the campus and not just their particular program. So really tying in that the person that does the Perkins grant on campus to be able to think through some of those things. Had something else, I lost it. I'll remember it.
Thank you. And now for our last question. What advice do you have for colleagues external to student activities when using this template to conduct a quality program review?
I would like to say invite them. Invite your friends from student activities into the conversation. But invite all your partners into the conversation, because you learn so much. I think Alex touched on it. I know I touched on it. You learn so much from each other. And the resources that you're able to pull together is really going to help build your story. And definitely just kind of going back, make sure you're consistent in your data collection, make sure you're consistent in how you approach students to seek data from them. So I think those would be my key recommendations.
Yeah, in addition to those, I'll kind of harken back to a few things I chatted about in the beginning, is really embracing the process and not just viewing it as a checkbox. You know, again, it's easy to get caught up in day to day. You know, I think we do a great job on our campus of, okay, the time is coming. This is when program review is going to be due. We need to start thinking about this now, and really kind of pushing folks to do that. But to embrace it, because especially with kind of the template redesign is useful. So, you know, I certainly appreciate that. And it's hard, but you know, I will go back to what Amy said. Amy said it has to be collaborative, because if you have just all of these silos operating, again, somebody over there might have the same goals as you, might have the same, gosh, if only we could do this. And, you know, often in student activities, we have the skills to do this, because as folks in student activities know, it's, yes, and do this. So we have a wide array of skills. But to have those conversations, be open and transparent in the process. And I even think amongst staff, I know program review can easily kind of be this thing that lives in the upper echelon of the institution. But having staff take a look at it and say, hey, does this make sense? Is this true? Do we do this? You know, and then as I mentioned earlier, I think getting that student feedback actually in the process would be really valuable. And the one last thing I'll say on that, again, think about it as you do the plan, you're gone tomorrow. Having somebody be able to look at that and make sense of the work that has been done. You know, I know that has been extremely helpful for me in the program review, specific ones that I've been involved in. I was not in those roles prior to that. So I really had to lean back on that previous program review of, okay, I think I might know what was going on. But again, it gives kind of that 30,000 foot snapshot of what was happening. So I know that was really helpful, even in new roles that I've taken, kind of looking at that and saying, okay, I think I got it now. Now let's move forward.
Well, thank you both so much for your insights and everything that you've shared. At this point, we have a few moments for Q&A, and we'd invite our participants to kind of use the chat feature to ask any questions about what was shared or any questions about how you're proceeding through. So I'll just go ahead and open up the chat, and if there's anything that folks have questions on. Not seeing anything. Want to give space and opportunity for folks to type. I know navigating Zoom is not always easy in that regard.
Jewel, it's that classic, no, wait, I had a question, I couldn't type fast enough.
Exactly. We have one that just came in from Sarah. Oh, see, I'm glad we waited because we've got a few. So the first one is, are there common metrics used to determine program effectiveness? We use SSI, but others like participation, cost per student, etc. I don't know who wants to respond to that.
If only. You know, and that's kind of the blessing and the curse, I think, when you think about kind of the student support services side of program review. You know, when I've seen the academic discipline program review pieces, there is a bit more of that. Grades are grades. Most colleges use grade, you know, so there is that sense of that. But you know, when I talked about kind of it is a nebulous area, it's hard to have consistency. And I'll also point out, you know, I think it's using peers throughout the state. So specifically with ICSA, you know, especially as folks are gearing up to submit that, you know, here pretty darn soon, you know, I think that organization or whatever area in that state organization can be kind of a sounding board of what are folks looking at. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I know for me, actually, when you talk about the common matrix, I wouldn't say that there is one for our campus, but pretty much what I did is I keep going back to the faculty side. You need to invite involvement people into the academic conversations, because what I did was I actually adjusted their matrix so it shadows the academic matrix that we use for assessment here in our office. So looking at things, I can make things a little bit more comparable to the academic side in those learning outcomes when I get to share that with others.
Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, I might even go broader, and it's hard to look at some of those you know, national organizations wouldn't necessarily be specific to program review of Illinois, but I think looking to some of those more national things, so thinking about CAS standards, you know, for student activities, thinking about, you know, kind of those couple of big organizations that there are, and I think, you know, there could be some, can't be certain, of kind of that ratio of cost per student of programming and getting into some of those specifics. There might be some best practices out there. But I think certainly within the state, specifically student activities, it's leaning on colleagues from around the state. Tracy. Yep. In addition to what Marcy said, you know, I think it's hearkening back to the previous program review that was done. I was in a similar situation, you know, back in 16, doing the student activities, and it's nice now because there is a standardized template that. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I do not believe that was the case back then. So you could kind of just do it. But really kind of looking back to previous ones and talking to folks on campus that have been involved in the process. You know, either from kind of the student support services side or even the academic side. That's kind of how I got when I got that initial email, oh, and you're going to be responsible to do this. What? I don't even know what program review is, and you're telling me I have to do it. So that's kind of what worked for me.
Yeah, I would add the same thing. Our department has had a year of transition. So when we talked about program review this coming year, I just, like Alex said, look back at the past ones to build on that. So, and look at the last couple of years of data collected within your department.
Mm-hmm. And I even know some institutions, you can find those. So I know, especially when I was doing my very first one, you know, I did look at the last one, but then I just didn't know where to start. So that's where Google was also my friend, and knowing that OCCRL has resources that can help as well.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you everyone for participating and for the questions in the chat. I know this is a conversation that we'll be continuing as folks go through program review and access the tools that we have available at OCCRL. So thank you all. And I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Kuspa Sims and Alex for your time and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. I know for me, it has been insightful learning about how you all do program review and how this process kind of comes together, as someone that has never done it before. So I, to Tracy's question as well. So this has been really insightful for me, and learning how you and your departments and your institutions kind of work through that process and navigate some of the more challenging parts of it, and also how you are using tools to do this, and to make sure that it is equity minded and equity guided in the work that you're doing to support students both in their academic as well as their leadership needs and personal needs. So thank you for your time. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us.
Provided here is the contact information for our panelists. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions regarding any of the content discussed today. We encourage all of our listeners to subscribe to the OCCRL Network News. Once subscribed, you will receive regular communication from our office, including all of our resources, professional development opportunities, and other events.
And so we also just wanted to let you all know that the Council for the Study of Community Colleges is now housed within OCCRL at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So we wanted to invite you all to register and attend the upcoming conference, our 62nd annual conference, which will be happening virtually April 15th through the 17th. We invite you all to register, and for more details, you can visit the link that is available on this slide that we'll also be putting into the chat.
We would like to thank you again for attending today's webinar, and we hope that you will join us again soon.
Stay connected with OCCRL as we continue to add resources to our online learning community. Thank you for watching this webinar and for your contributions to supporting the program review process.